I started out my career, weirdly enough, in publishing. I grew up watching documentary films. I always loved documentary films. It was always a field I was interested in, but growing up in Brooklyn, I didn't know anybody in that field, and I wasn't exposed to it. You know, I was a viewer, but I didn't know anybody who worked in that field. I went to CNN. Well, before CNN, I went to work for ABC. So I worked in ABC and got some training there, and ABC paid for my education at New York University, which is what really put me on the path. Because to graduate with a master's from NYU, you have to create your own documentary, like a 20-minute film. So that would be my first film, and then from NYU, I went to work for CNN. And I went there to learn kind of the craft of news, hard news. And from there, I kind of strayed a bit, but I didn't get into documentaries till about 2000. And I took a job working on a series called This Far by Faith. It was being produced by the same people who produce Eyes on the Prize, Black Side. And you know, if you know documentary films, you know Eyes on the Prize, and that's, you know, they're legendary. So I was happy. I moved to Boston for a year, and that's where I really jumped into documentary films. So after Black Side and This Far by Faith, I came back to New York, which was where where I grew up, and I started working for other filmmakers who I had met through Black Side. And I worked on a lot of, various films in different capacities, and I kind of got my training there until I was ready to do my own film. I tried Bill Clinton spoke at Daisy Bates's memorial, and he speaks of her so eloquently and beautifully. I wanted in my film for 2 years. I tried to get him in my film, and his people took me on a merry dance for 2 years, and they could never commit. And that would be fine, because obviously he's a busy person. The way he spoke of her and the relationship he supposedly had with her, I thought it would have been important for him to be in the film, because I knew he had a lot to say, not just about race relations in Arkansas, not just about her life, but even about leadership and what it takes to be a leader. So I thought he would have been great in the film, but he did not see the need, and he never, I could never get a commitment from them, and eventually I gave up because it just didn't make any sense tying up my time chasing him. And the thing that upset me the most about that is the fact that he appeared in a lot of films in those 2 years. So he made a clear-cut decision about the films that he would appear in and the things that he didn't. He's in a film about the New York Times crossword puzzle. He's in a film about King. He's in all these other films, and I couldn't understand why he couldn't give me 30 minutes even to talk about Daisy, who he supposedly loved so much and thought so highly of. And I thought that said a lot. To me, that said a lot. And so, of course I hold a grudge. I'm still, because if he had not been in those films, then I could more say, I know he's really busy, he's traveling the world, he has his foundation, so he has no time. But if you can be in a film about the New York Times crossword puzzle, hey, he could have talked about Daisy for 30 minutes, because I heard she campaigned for him a lot, even from her wheelchair. He used, when she was available, she was out there for him when he was campaigning for governor, every time he ran. So I was very disappointed in that he, he couldn't do that he wouldn't lend himself to that. And that, that is the reality of that world, I think Daisy Bates's personal and public struggle for acceptance and recognition within American society as an African-American woman is a story that transcends time and continues today. Her story is also a very human story about a woman who was not perfect by any means, who could not be put up on a pedestal, which is probably part of the reason why she's not recognized, because she didn't follow the path that would be considered acceptable in a lot of ways by who was chosen to be a leader and who is not. And part of the question I ask in the film is, who decides who our leaders are and who decides who we should remember in history? I think it was definitely decided that she would not be remembered in history because she was not Rosa Parks. And I think that question needs to continually be asked, is who's telling our stories and who is, writing our history? And that continues to be a struggle today, because obviously within the United States, there is an issue with us not knowing enough about our history, especially in the case of African Americans. We've lost quite a bit of our history. And so there's always this need to keep reminding ourselves of people who've passed on, like Daisy Bates, who contributed so much and who are now unfortunately forgotten. But I think the real reason her story should resonate is because of that fight. The fight that she fought is the fight that African Americans have been fighting for hundreds of years since they were brought to the United States as slaves. And it's that fight to be part of this democratic process that we were promised that we would be part of, that we were promised in our Constitution. And so Daisy's fight is an ongoing fight. Also, her fight for education and equal rights in education for Black children, to be able to sit next to not just white children, but to be able to sit and have access to the same information and materials as other children of privilege. I think that fight is ongoing because today our schools in America are more segregated now than they were even during Daisy's time. So that makes the film also critical because I think people need to be reminded of what Daisy and all the people who helped her were fighting for in 1957 and how far we have strayed from that dream and how far we've strayed from that fight. And despite all her sacrifices, I think she would look back and be very disappointed at how we have forgotten that struggle and how complacent we have gotten over the years as far as allowing our kids to still, go through school with a substandard education. I think that would be a great disappointment to her because she fought so hard for the opposite.